And what you just read says that God will remove that obsession, compulsion, drink, and all we have to do is what?
Seek.
Okay, and what do we do to seek God?
Now, if we're going to take it seriously, we have a responsibility
taking the steps
and a mission and a purpose to carry God's Word,
and that's an absolute
promise, expressed through the 12 steps to other alcoholics. Then
God will remove
most assuredly that means that we need to have
if we seek
an intense and immediate interest on the new
person. It's
person.
important to understand that does not mean sporadically.
Somebody, after all,
or when
gave
the
us a hand.
mood happens to strike us, or
so
when
now
there's
we
nothing
have
else
to be,
which is distracting
we have
us.
to feel some confidence that we know what we're doing
basis.
when we start talking to a new person.
Says which
and
must go with
that's why it's so important to read chapter 7
we just
thoroughly and understand what it's saying.
Studied that a few nights ago. The proper use of our will is
we've already learned that when we are working with somebody new, we're going to try to find out something about them,
story,
their history.
Return in all things to the Father of light.
We're going to tell them about ourselves and how we
drank. To
drank.
recognize as a simple fact.
Tell them how alcohol affected us, what it did to us.
We don't have any days off.
We're going to tell them about the terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair.
We don't build up any kind of
tell them about how we tried to stop
sobriety or serenity.
We're going to tell them how alcohol literally brought us to our knees.
Draw on like we would a bank account.
Then we're going to tell them about the disease, and we're going to explain to them what's
what we
the matter
have
with
is
them
a
if they are
daily
the same
reprieve,
as we.
which really boils down to an hourly reprieve.
If they're chronic alcoholic, they have a deadly, incurable,
however you want to
progressive illness. They don't stop drinking, they're going to die. Clear as a bell.
This business of seeking God is something which goes on constantly with us. It becomes the way we live our lives.
We believe they have, if they're an alcoholic.
The big book tells us, we studied this some time back, that the spiritual life is not a theory.
If you don't stop,
we have to live it.
You can't stop.
And that brings us right back to the 12
How
steps
useless is it to say to a new person, don't drink?
Practice these
Why in the hell do you think they came to AA in the first place?
All my affairs.
They can't stop drinking. That's why they're with us.
The beautiful thing about all of this
is they can stop on their own. They don't need to be with us.
And people
probably
have slipping and sliding around out there.
Wonderful benefits from working the 12 steps. No
will give you all
that.
kinds of excuses and
they don't need
why
AA
they
for
did
that.
so, or why they did.
The guy who can stop drinking, the girl who
many
can
of
stop
them
drinking
have been
on
very
his own or
carefully
her own
taught
doesn't need us.
A false doctrine.
Why in the world would you tell them stop drinking?
Human solutions. And that false doctrine is that
once
they
we
must
told
look
them
for
that
the triggers.
they're victims of this disease,
there ain't no such
and if
thing.
they don't stop, they're going to die, and they can't stop because they're powerless.
Think about it just in terms
then
of your own.
we need to then
it
tell
would be
them how to get
wonderful
stopped.
to feel that somehow or another, if we can
then
just
we tell
avoid
them how
the
we
triggers,
recovered.
those things
the big
about
book
our
tells
lives
us
which make us drink,
what to do about that.
that we would
go
be
to the
just
bottom
fine.
of
Total
page 92.
balderdash. We have to always go back to basics, guys. And when
Last
you're working
line.
with your sponsees,
Even though your protege,
is to
by the way, that's kind of an interesting term you can use for your sponsees. When I came in, we called them babies.
With the basics of their problem.
And then some guys in Chicago started calling them pigeons. By the way, pigeon is not a pejorative term, you know.
In the most simple possible term.
It means the next to carry the message.
They can't stop drinking.
So we called them babies, and then they called them pigeons.
And whenever the obsession and compulsion strikes,
and now we call them
because they have no power not to drink.
When I first heard that word, I said, what the hell is that?
The contrary is a trap for the unwary.
And now the fancy ones,
the kind
the
of
people
thing that
with
is
the
every day
spiritual
newcomers in front of us,
ascendancy over most of us, call them sponsorees. I've got some sponsorees.
Everything that we do in this workshop is pointed toward the opposite.
See the notches in my belt over here?
Which is that we must have a spiritual awakening.
Even though your protege may not have entirely admitted his condition.
Close to God.
Remember, now this is all taking place at the first meeting.
When we don't do that, we are therefore
He has become very curious to know how you got well.
And we'll drink
Top of page 93.
Ultimately,
Let him ask that question,
sometimes
if you In other
Some
words,
people can't get away with it at all.
You've just gotten to
Some
tell
people
me
can
that,
get away with it
that
even
if I
for
don't
years.
quit, I'm going to die, but that I can't quit
But
on my own. Now,
ultimately,
what do I do? How
The
did you get
obsession,
sober?
compulsion is back.
Boy, I'm sure glad you asked
and
that
it's too
question,
strong
'cause I'm
for
about
them.
to tell you. Let him ask you that question, if you will. Tell him
So if you, whatever time you hear
exactly
chapter 5 being read,
what happened
please
to
remember
you.
what it's saying.
In the
Basic
forward of the
stuff.
first
You're an
edition, the
alcoholic.
word
You
is
can't manage your own life.
precisely.
No human
show
power
other
is going to
alcoholics
relieve you of
precisely
your alcoholism.
How we have recovered is the main
God
purpose
can
of
and
this
He will.
volume. Here the term
you
is
have to
exactly. Now let's take that to heart. Let's think what
And
that
sets the
really
stage
means.
for the whole, everything else that
Does that
follows
mean
in
we're
this
going to
big
beat
book.
around the bush?
Because
That mean
whatever
we're
else
going to
we
make up
find,
stuff?
we're going to be
We're going to
looking
leave
at
things out.
the
Oh, for
directions.
goodness sakes alive, you mustn't mention
seeking
anything about
God.
God to this new person.
That's
They
what
might
the
turn
steps
right around
are.
and run out the door.
Directions for seeking
How many times
God.
have you heard people say, well,
Directions
when
which
I
will
come
lead us to a
in
place
here,
where we
if they had mentioned God to
enter
me,
the
well, I
world of the
just would have
Spirit,
left.
become God conscious,
Balderdash.
develop a vital sixth sense, which allows us to be inspired,
Total nonsense.
and we are restored to sanity.
How can you
And all
tell
of these things
somebody
happen because
exactly
we
how
earnestly
you have
sought
recovered,
God by working
assuming
the
now
steps.
that you
we
work
don't
the
have
steps,
any other method of
and not
recovery
mention God?
in Alcoholics Anonymous. You're going to find all kinds
Can't
of
be
stuff
done.
floating
Not
around
without
out
lying
there,
about it.
But it's not
To
AA.
leave God out of how you recovered, and you lied by omission big time.
And all these other
One of the
things
great
that are
liars
out
of
there
that
have been
particular
tried
day.
over the centuries, and none of them ever
There isn't
worked.
any way
And they
to
still
leave
don't
God
work.
out. So what's the big
As
book
far as
say?
I'm concerned, they never will
Tell
work.
them exactly what
Because
happened to
they
you.
do
Stress
not
the spiritual
approach
feature
the
freely.
solution to our problem, and our
If the
problem
man
is
be
spiritual
agnostic or
bankruptcy.
atheist, make it emphatic he does not have to agree with your conception of
It's
God.
necessary for us to be.
He can choose any conception he
Say that.
likes, provided it makes sense to him.
Now,
The
last
main thing
week
is
we
that he be
started our
willing to believe in a
consideration of the
power
12
greater than
steps.
himself, and that he live by spiritual principles.
Remember that chapter 7, which begins on page 89.
Now these are the things this is nothing new.
A part
We
of
learned
the
that all the way
12
back in Bill's story.
not all of
Remember,
it.
this is what Ebby said to Bill. And it's what turned
Chapter
Bill
7
around. Bill was agnostic, or
does not
worse.
attempt to
Ebby
define
said,
the
"Look,
spiritual
Bill,
awakening, and we went through
sure,
that
I've got
in some
religion.
detail last week.
Because he had the Oxford group, which was a religious
The
movement.
spiritual awakening in some
He
kind
said
of
you can choose your own
means
idea of
that
God.
we have,
You don't have to
drawn
believe in
close
my
to
idea
God.
or the Oxford's idea or
We
anybody
have-
else's.
through our own efforts and with God's grace, we've
And
been
the big book says no matter
had those
how
things removed
weak
from
that
us that
idea
blocked
might
us
be,
from God, our
it's a place
our
we
defects
start.
and our insanities and our guilts are gone.
And later on, and even and
We've
especially today, it's become kind of
We've had
cute
the
to say, "Oh, you're
spiritual
taking an
experiences one
ashtray or a
after
doorknob
another.
or something like that."
We've developed a lot of faith already.
Or even the AA group. I'm going to ask you, do you ever
We
see
feel
anybody
close
get down
to
on their
God.
knees
We
and pray
feel
to
as
an
if
AA
we've
group?
come to know Him.
Can you
And
imagine
some of
what
us,
would happen in
even
that
this
room
early
at
in
that
the
time?
game, will have already
Well, it's your
come
my
to
higher
understand that
power.
we love
Please let me
God,
pray to you.
not just He loving us.
Nobody be foolish
Our
enough to
lives
do
have
that.
started
would
to
they?
straighten out.
And yet the whole
We're
big
able
book
to
and the
live our lives
our plan of recovery and the
with a
steps
lot more
requires prayer
equanimity,
all
a
the way
lot more
through, doesn't it?
serenity than we had before.
Not only prayer, but meditation. Did you ever try to
We're
meditate
feeling-
to a doorknob?
better. We're feeling stronger. We're feeling
Think
saner.
about it.
Because our
Everywhere in the big
insanities
book,
have
the
been removed
term
from us.
power greater than ourselves or higher power is mentioned.
And all
It's
of
always
these things
capitalized.
and many others
Why?
go to
Because
make
that
up
means
that
deity.
spiritual awakening. Now, when you
Why
look
would we
at
try
the
to
12
hide
step,
that?
every time you look at it, when you teach
We're not going
it,
to convince anybody
the 12 step is a promise.
to believe in God,
It's a great
but
promise.
it's very clear that it is absolutely
And it
essential
probably
for
is
us
the
to
greatest
tell the
promise in
truth
the big
about
book.
how we recovered.
It goes right to the heart of everything.
The other idea that we
does.
found back in Bill's story is
The
restated here.
response he is going to
The
have.
main
is
thing is that he'd be
spiritual
willing to believe in a power
As a
greater than
result
himself.
of
Everything
working
started
the
from
12
that point.
steps. And your job is
And
to
again,
teach
this
him
is a
or
willingness.
her
And
how to
no,
do
we're not
that.
telling them you got to believe. We're telling
and
them
monitor their
you got to do
progress.
whatever it takes to
And work
find
with
the
them
willingness
and encourage
to
them.
believe that there just might be a power out there greater than yourself.
Your
That's where it
job
all
is not
starts.
to run their lives. The job is
When dealing
not
with
to
such a
supply
person, you'd
them
better
with
use
the
everyday language to describe spiritual
necessities of life
principles.
or any of the luxuries.
There's no
they
use
may
arousing
desire.
their prejudice he may have against certain
job
theological
is
terms
teaching
and conceptions
And encourage them
by
and
which he may
monitor them
already
as
be
they work the
confused.
steps.
Don't raise such
If you're not
issues,
doing that,
no matter
you
what
ain't
your
no
own
sponsor.
convictions are. Quite obviously,
you may be
this
a lot of
paragraph,
things.
though
You
it
may be a
doesn't
best
come
friend,
right
you
out
may
and
be
say it, is
a mentor, you may be a
admonishing
bully.
us as sponsors
You may be somebody who is made
not ever
likes
to
make other
indulge
people
ourselves in
dependent on you.
evangelizing.
You may just
for any
need somebody to
particular
have
religion
lunch
or
with or
religious
breakfast with
concept.
once a week and make them call you
We
every
speak
day.
in general terms.
But you're not a sponsor.
It's a great temptation, and there are those in our
Sponsor
fellowship
teaches
who are so
the
steeped
steps.
in the necessity
Because
to
we
constantly
don't have
carry the
anything
particular
else.
message of their particular
all we have.
religious beliefs or their sect,
teaching your sponsees
that
to
this is
make
something
coffee,
which they
clean up the
feel compelled
ashtrays,
to
greet
do.
at the door.
and every
All
once
that
in a
other
while
stuff.
that might be effective
Fine.
to get the right people listening to
There are
them.
good things that go on in our
But it's
groups.
very unlikely
We
to
need
be
to
effective
support
with
our
most of the
groups.
people who come in the door.
We need to supply a place at the very least for the
Your
newcomer.
prospect may belong to a
Feel
religious
welcome.
denomination.
Get
His
to
religious
learn for
education and training may
how to
be far
recover.
superior to yours. In that case, you're going to wonder how
if
you
you're
can
not
add
teaching
anything
the
to what he
steps,
already knows.
You're not a sponsor.
And boy, I'll tell you what,
You missed the one
run into
thing.
that every once in a while as a
The
sponsor.
whole program
Because
which
many
will work
religions
for them.
are based upon
Inevitably.
their concept of what
See,
is the
when
end
we
all
look at
for
the
all
promises,
human problems,
remember
including,
that the
of course,
promises
alcoholism
are
and drug
the
addiction.
inevitable result of working.
That once
the steps.
having embraced their religious ideals and
And
having
if you
become a member
are-
and
if
done
your
the catechism or
desire
done
is
the
to be an
confession or
excellent
had the
sponsor, and I
baptism
pray to
or
God that all of you have
visited
that
the
desire.
old man on the mountaintop
That's
or
the
learned
biggest
how
problem in our
to wear a
fellowship today
saffron
is lack
robe
of
and
good
play the
sponsorship.
gongs and cymbals, whatever they
Then what
happen
you're
to
doing
teach.
is you're preparing
And
yourself.
once having done that, everything is going to be just
to be a good
hunky-dory.
teacher.
And if you got
Which means
problems
that you
like
have some confidence
being a
in
sinful
what you
drinker
teach,
or a
if you have
sinful
some
drug
knowledge,
user, those will all
you
be
practice
taken away.
these things yourself, and you know what you're doing, and you know what you're
And
talking about, and you
unfortunately,
show through your actions and
that doesn't work
through
very
your
well for
enthusiasm
most
and your
people.
dedication to this
And yet,
that it's real.
many folks are so imbued with the idea that that's true that you may have a little difficulty getting
If you're
through
not
to
doing
them.
that,
But that's okay,
you're not a sponsor.
because we want them to see what we do and to want what we have,
Remember, we define
And to be
sponsorship
willing
the
to
same as the Big Book.
follow what we've done in order to
Big
get
Book
what
says,
we have. But he'll be
both you,
curious to learn
new man,
why his own convictions have not
Walk day by
worked
day
and why yours seem to
in
work
the
so
path
well.
of spiritual progress.
He may be an example
Spiritual progress for us
of the truth that faith alone is
is a function of
insufficient.
working the steps.
Faith without
See,
works
once we
is
understand
dead.
what we're really doing here, then it gets
That's
real
lip
simple.
service is paid to
It makes it
that
very easy. We can take
as a
all this
principle,
balderdash
and I
and float
suppose
around
it's
us
paid lip service paid that in
It's
just about
nonsense.
every religion.
and put it
Faith
aside.
without works is dead. In one form or another, that idea has pretty much universal application and acceptance. But did you stop to think what it means? Faith as a state of mind
Now,
is
if we're going to
therefore
be,
useless.
if we're going to take it seriously, that we have a
Faith which is not
responsibility
exercised
and a mission
has
and a
no
purpose
value.
to carry God's
It's
word.
dead, as it's expressed through the
And what
12
is the
steps
work
to other alcoholics, then most assuredly
is
that
talked
means
about
that we
here,
need to have
especially in our
an
12
intense
steps.
and immediate interest on the new person, doesn't it? Faith translated into somebody, after all, the action of faith gave us a hand, or in other words, actively. So now we
trusting
have to be
our higher power.
we have to feel some confidence that we know what we're doing. It's not enough
When
to
we-
mouth the
when we
phrases,
start
it's
talking
not
to a new
enough to
person.
memorize the prayer.
That's why it's so important to read
Not enough
chapter
to go
7
through the rituals and thoroughly and understand what I'm saying. Tithe and do all the other things. What has to happen?
We've
is
already
that
learned
we have
that
to get
when
to
we
the point
are
where
working
we
with somebody
exercise
new,
our faith. We're going to try to find out something about them, a little of their history. And that's what we teach here in AA. We're going to tell them about
And
ourselves.
that's what the 12
and how we
steps are all
drank.
about. We're going to tell them how alcohol
To be
affected us,
vital,
what it
faith
did to
must
us.
be accompanied by
We're going
self-sacrifice
to tell them about the terror of
and
bewilderment,
unselfish,
frustration,
constructive
and despair.
action.
We're going to tell them about
In
how
Bill's
we tried
story,
to stop
we
them.
heard and we read what
We're going to
Bill
tell
said,
them how
that if a
alcohol
man
literally
fails
brought us to our knees.
to perfect and enlarge his spiritual
And we're going to
life
tell them about the disease.
through
We're going to
work
explain
and
to them what's the matter with
self-sacrifice
them,
for
if they are
others,
the same as we.
he cannot survive the certain low spots
If they're
ahead.
chronic
He'll break
alcoholic,
again.
they have a deadly,
This is
incurable,
another way of saying the same
progressive illness.
thing.
They don't stop drinking,
To
they're
be
going to die.
vital,
Clear as a
faith
bell,
must be
that's
accompanied
it.
by self-sacrifice and unselfish, constructive
The
action.
problem that we've had, and
Let him
we
see that you are
believe
not
they
there
have,
to
if they're
instruct him in
alcoholic,
religion.
They can't stop drinking.
Admit he
You're
probably
caught
knows
in
more
life.
about it than
You
you
don't
do.
stop, you die.
But
You
call
can't
to his
stop.
attention the fact that however deep his faith and
How
knowledge, he
useless
could
is
not
it
have
to say to a
applied
new
it,
person, don't drink.
or he would not
Why in the
drink.
hell do you think they came to AA in the first place?
Notice the word
They
applied.
can't stop drinking.
Means
That's why
action.
they're with us. They can
Putting
stop on
the
their own. They
faith
don't need
into
to be
action.
with us.
Faith without works is dead.
They can probably have
Perhaps your story will help him see where he has
wonderful benefits
failed
from working the
to
12 steps,
practice
no
the very
question about
precepts
that.
he knows so well.
But they don't need AA for that.
We represent no
The guy who
particular
can
faith
stop
or
drinking, the girl
denomination.
that
We're
can
dealing
stop
only with
drinking on
general
his own or
principles
her own doesn't need it.
common to most
Why in the world
denominations.
would you tell them stop drinking? So, once we've told them that they're victims of this disease,
As a sponsor, you're
and if
going
they don't
to
stop,
find
they're going to die, and they can't stop
must meet
because
this
they're powerless.
situation often.
Then we
But it's
we're
not
gonna-
that
we
difficult
need to
if
then
you
tell them
know
how
what
to
you're
get
doing.
stopped, don't we? So then we tell them
And
how
here's
we
the basic
recovered.
stuff.
And
All
the big book
religions
tells us that I know
what to do
of.
about that.
Go
All
to the bottom,
ecclesiastical
on page
programs,
92. all semi-religions, all sects, all have established
Last line.
certain
Even though
basic
your
principles
protege,
they believe
by the
in.
way, that's kind of an interesting
And those
term you
basic
can use for your
principles have been around
sponsees.
forever. They're
When I
pretty
came
much the
in,
same
we called them
across the
babies.
board. It's just that
And
various
then some guys
religions
in
apply
Chicago
them in
started
different ways.
calling them pigeons.
Some
By the way,
religions have
pigeon is
town
not a
meetings
pejorative
and nobody
term, you
ever
know.
leads, and some religions
It means the
have
next to carry the
people at
message.
the top in the hierarchy that is untouchable.
We called them babies, and then they
And
called them
infallible.
pigeons.
It doesn't matter
And now
in
we
terms
call
of the
them
principles which are being
sponsees.
espoused by the religion.
When I
they're all
first
the
heard
same.
that word, I said, "What in the hell is
And
that?"
they're obviously true. This is what,
And now the fancy ones, the people
intuitively
with
at least,
the
we come
the
to know that these
spiritual
things are true.
ascendancy over most
But now
of us
what do you
call
do
them
about it? You go to
sponsorees.
church on Sunday, let's say, and the preacher gets up there and
I've got
preaches
some
the sermon, and you
sponsorees.
say,
Yeah, boy, that's right. You see the
That's
notches
the way
in
I
my
ought to
belt
be.
over here. And about an hour later,
Even though your
scratch your head
protege
saying,
may
"Yeah, but
not
how do I get there?
have entirely
How do I
admitted
be
his
there?"
condition.
Remember, now this is all taking place at the first meeting.
When you have the 12 steps, you don't have
He has
to
become
wonder,
very
do you?
curious to know how you got
The 12
well.
steps are these same
Top of page
spiritual
93.
principles
Let him ask that
restated
question,
as
if you
steps
will.
of action.
In other words,
Faith without
well,
works is
you know,
dead.
you've just gotten
It
to
is
tell
the
me that
action of faith
that if I don't quit, I'm going
The
to
12
die,
steps
but that
are
I can't
exactly
quit on my
that.
own. Now, what do I do?
12
How did
steps
you
are
get
faith
sober?
in action.
You say, boy, I'm
And these
sure
are the
glad you asked
actions
that
which we
question.
take to
I'm about
acquire
tell
and
you.
then to keep faith.
Let him ask you that question.
And that's
if you
why
will.
they work.
Tell him.
That's why they're so powerful.
Exactly.
And that's why most
What
religious
happened
leaders
to you?
today are more and more coming to recognize
In the forward
the
to the
12
first
steps are
edition, the
critical
word is
in dealing with
precisely
alcoholics and addicts.
to show other
Because they
alcoholics
have to be taught
precisely
how
we have
to put their
recovered is
faith
the main
into
purpose
action
of this volume.
every day
Here
in
the
a
term
practical
is
way
exactly.
with
Now let's
discipline
take
and
that to heart.
consistency, and
Let's
that's
think
what
what
the
that
12
really
steps do.
means. Does that mean we're going to
So
beat
you see,
around
when
the
you're
bush?
teaching the
Does that
steps,
mean we're
you're
going to
teaching
make up
something
stuff?
of
We're
enormous
going to leave
importance.
things out.
Probably the most
Oh, for
important
goodness sakes alive, you
lessons
mustn't
that
mention
anybody
anything
can ever
about God
learn
to
are
this new
contained in
person.
those
They might
12
turn right
steps.
around and run out the
And as
door.
a sponsor, you get
How many times you
the
heard people
privilege
say,
of
well,
carrying that
when
message.
I come in here,
So you
if
see,
they
we're not
mentioned
putting
God
notches
to me,
in
well,
our
I
belts.
just would have left. Bald.
We're carrying a spiritual message to other human beings so that they too can recover. And
Total
we're doing
nonsense.
God's work.
And when we look at
How
that way,
can
then
you
we
tell
recognize
somebody
that being a sponsor
exactly how you
is a
have
mission.
recovered,
It's a purpose in
assuming
life,
now that you work the
not a
steps,
chore. It's a
and not
great
mention
opportunity.
God?
It's a great blessing. It's one of the greatest gifts that God gives us is the
Can't
ability
be
to
done.
carry the message
Not
to
without
other people.
lying about it. You
We
leave
take
God
it in
out
that
of how you
light,
recovered, and you
and it's
lied
never a
by
burden.
omission big
It's
time.
always a blessing.
You're one of the great
When
liars
somebody
of that
asks you to
particular
help
day.
them, you say thank you
There isn't any way.
because
to
you're
leave
being
God
honored
out. So what's the big
with
book
their
say?
trust.
Tell them
You're being
exactly
given the
what happened to you.
opportunity
Stress the
to help
spiritual
somebody
feature
else
freely.
at the same time to grow spiritually yourself.
If the man be agnostic
And
or
without
atheist,
that,
make it
you
emphatic
couldn't
he
buy
does not
what
have
we
to
have
agree
for $10 billion.
with your conception of God.
That's
He
the
can choose
bottom
any
line. That's why
conception he
we're all here
likes,
tonight.
provided
Top
it
of
makes
page
sense to
94,
him.
please.
The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself, and that he live by spiritual principles. That we represent no particular faith
Now,
or
these are the things
denomination.
this is nothing new.
Now, as a
We learned that
sponsor,
all the
you
way back
need to
in
be
Bill's
aware
story. Remember, this is what Abby
that
said
some
to Bill.
of the literature
And it's what
other
turned
than
Bill
the big
around.
book
Bill was agnostic.
does
or
not
worse.
necessarily follow
And
that
he said, look, Bill,
precept.
sure, I've got religion.
You got to be careful in
He
dealing
had
with
the
your
Oxford group,
sponsees
which
not
was a
to be
religious movement.
inconsistent with them.
He said, you can choose your own idea of
For
God.
example,
You don't have to believe in my idea or the Oxford's idea or anybody
the
else's.
idea of sin is not any part of AA.
And the big book says no matter
Where you
how
do find
weak
mention of
that
12
idea might
deadly
be,
sins, or
it's a
7
place to
deadly sins,
start.
or whatever they are.
And
In
later
other
on,
literature,
and even
you do
in
not
especially
find that
today,
in
it's
the big
become
book.
kind of cute to say, oh,
We
you
don't
take an
indulge
ashtray or
ourselves
doorknob
in
or
that
something
kind
like
of
that. Or even the AA group.
examination of
I ask you, do you ever
ourselves.
see
or
anybody get down on their knees
that
and
has
pray
to
to
be
an
a
AA
particular
group?
religious belief. That's fine.
Can you imagine
We don't
what
teach
happened
it.
in that room at that time? Well, it's your my higher
We
power.
don't make
Please let me
those
pray
kinds
to
of
you.
judgments.
Nobody be foolish enough
We're
to do
dealing
that,
with
would they?
defects of character.
And yet the whole big book and
We're dealing with actions we took
planet
which
recovery
did
and the
not
steps
work,
requires prayer all the way
which
through.
were
doesn't it?
wrongful in the sense
Not
that
only
they
prayer
may have
but
hurt others.
meditation. Did you ever
We
try to
make
meditate
amends
to a
in order to
doorknob?
be freed from the guilt, remorse, and shame
Just think
that
about it.
arises from the fact that we may have hurt others.
Everywhere in the big book that the term power greater than ourselves or higher
We deal
power
with
is mentioned, it's
defects
always
of character
capitalized.
and with guilt.
Why? Because that means a deity.
We deal with
Why would we try to hide
resentment
that?
and dishonesty and selfishness.
We're not going to
and fear.
convince anybody to believe in God, but it's very clear that
deal with
it is
the
absolutely
effects of
essential
fear.
for us to tell the truth about how we
acting
recovered.
upon our natural God-given instincts.
The other idea that we
Which
found
are
back in
warped
Bill's
and
story is
perverted those
restated here.
instincts.
The main thing
So
is
that
that
they
he'd
no
be
longer
willing
work
to
for
believe
us,
in a
they work
power greater
against
than
us.
himself. Everything starts
And
from
as
that
a
point.
result of the warping of these instincts, we're blocked off
And
from
again,
God.
this is a willingness, and no, we're not telling
So
them you
long
gotta
as we're
believe,
blocked
we're
from
telling
God,
them
we cannot recover.
you gotta do whatever it takes to find
The
the
only hope
willingness
that we or our
to believe
sponsees
that there
have
just
of
might be
recovery
a
is
power
put
out there
God
greater than
between us
yourself.
and the
That's
boat.
where it all starts.
To do that, we have to
When
be
dealing
free
with
of the
such a
things
person,
which
you'd
block
better
us.
use everyday language to describe spiritual
That's
principles.
why we work a four-step.
There's no
find
use
out what
arousing
those
the
things
prejudice
are.
he may have against certain
And the fifth
theological
step to
terms and
admit those
conceptions,
things, and the seventh step
by which
to
he
ask
may
God to
already
mold
be
them.
confused. Don't raise such
And the ninth
issues,
step to be set
no
free
matter what
from
your
our
own
guilt.
convictions are.
At
Quite
that
obviously,
point, we
this
enter the
paragraph,
world
though
of
it
the
doesn't
spirit,
come
we
right out and
become
say it,
God
is
conscious, and we're restored to
admonishing us as
sanity.
sponsors
And we have fit
not
ourselves
ever
be
to
maximum
indulge
service to
indulge
God
ourselves in
and the people
evangelizing
around us.
for any particular religion.
So
or
anytime we
religious concept.
dwell on the concept of sin,
speak
we're
in
in a
general
blind
terms.
alley. Not only is it a blind alley, but it also
It's a great
happens to be
temptation, and
inconsistent.
there are those in our
with the
fellowship
teachings
who
of the
are
big
so
book.
steeped in the necessity to
Furthermore,
constantly carry
there is
the
a
particular
prayer in other
message
literature
of their particular
which
religious beliefs.
is now become
their
known
sect,
in many
That
meetings
this
among
is
many
something which
members
they
of the
feel
fellowship
compelled to do.
as the 11th-step prayer.
And every once in a while, that might be
That prayer
effective
is a
for-
sectarian
to get the
prayer.
right people listening to it. But it's very
And it speaks
unlikely
of
to
an
be effective
afterlife.
with most of the people who come in the door.
Now, there are many who walk in the door who don't believe
Your
in
prospect
the
may belong to a religious denomination.
Well,
His
to say
religious
to them,
education
this
and
is
training
the
may be far
AA
superior to yours.
11-step prayer is
In that
just
case, you're
dead
going to
wrong.
wonder how you can add anything to what he already
Nice
knows.
prayer. Wonderful if anybody
Boys,
wants to
I'll
use
tell you
it.
what, you run into that once
Not
in
the
a while.
11-step prayer. It can't be because it's
Because
a
many
sectarian
religions
prayer.
are
So we
based
have to be
upon
very careful
their
that we
concept
stick of what
the
is
letter
the end all for
of the
all
big
human
book.
problems, including, of course,
that we
alcoholism and
not
drug addiction. In any way become
that once having embraced their religious
inconsistent with
ideals
what we're trying to teach.
and having become a
Same thing
member
is true
and done the
of that,
catechism or done the confession or had
piece
the
of
baptism
nonsense
or
we find in the back of the
visited
book
the old
called
man on the mountaintop
Appendix 2.
or learned how to wear a
Appendix 2
saffron
is-
robe and play the gongs
is a
and
product
cymbals,
of
whatever
the
they happen to
atheists and
teach.
agnostics who
But
were
once having done that,
members of the
everything
fellowship at
is
the
going
time
to
the
be
big
just
book was
hunky-dory.
written.
And if you
And
got
they
problems,
tried
like
to get that stuff
being
into
a sinful
the
drinker or a
big book
sinful
and were
drug
unable to
user,
do so.
those will all be taken away.
As a matter of compromise, it was eventually
And
included in the second
unfortunately,
printing of the first edition.
that doesn't work very
As an
well for
appendix.
most people.
It is not part of the big
And yet,
book. And one of the
many
reasons
folks are
we have
so
to be careful
imbued
of
with
that
the
thing
idea
is
that
that
that's
it
true
is
that
very
you may have a little
confusing.
difficulty getting through
The
to
big
them.
book tells
But
us
that's okay, because
not,
we want them
that
to
Bill,
see
for
what we
example,
do
had a very
and to want what we
sudden
have
epiphany, a sudden
and to be
spiritual
willing
experience.
to follow what
But
we've
that God
done in
comes
order
to
to
most
get
men
what we
slowly.
have.
And this is repeated
But he'll
4
be
more
curious
times
to
in the
learn
big book.
why his own convictions have not
Clear
worked.
that anybody
and
who
why
reads
yours
the
seem to
book
work
is
so
not
well.
going to be confused, thinking they have to have an epiphany.
He may be
in
an
order to
example
recover.
of the
There's
truth
no
that
doubt
faith alone is
Not
insufficient.
something that would ever confuse anybody.
Faith without
who's
works is
properly
dead.
taught in
Uh-huh.
the big book.
That's lip service is
Furthermore,
paid to that.
That Appendix 2 puts
As
God
a
in
principle.
quotation marks.
And I suppose
Twice,
it's
God
paid,
conscious.
lip service paid that in just about every religion.
It's kind of a ha-ha-ha.
Faith without works
And
is
then
dead.
it
In one
says that
form
our
or
more
another,
religious members
that
call it
idea
God
has
consciousness.
pretty much universal
Got absolutely nothing
application
to
and
do
acceptance.
with
But
religion.
did you
The
stop to
big
think
book
what
on
it
page
means?
85 tells us that we all, to some extent,
Faith as a
become
state of
God
mind
has nothing to do
is
with
therefore
religion.
useless.
I'm just pointing out
Faith
to you
which
that
is
there are
not
certain aspects
exercised has
of
no value.
what passes
It's
for
dead.
common knowledge around the rooms, which is
What
in
is
fact
the
in
work
direct contravention of the big book, and
that is talked about
violates
here,
the
especially
principle
in our
that we are
12
not a
steps.
religion, nor do we teach any particular brand
Faith
of religion,
translated into
nor do we indulge
the
in any
action of
particular
faith.
teachings of any particular.
or in other words,
So we need to be
actively
careful and
trusting
not to confuse
the
the
higher
people
power.
we're teaching. This does not mean that you individually and
It's
your
not
own
enough
practice
to mouth the phrases,
are not free
enough
to
to
utilize
memorize
whatever
the prayers.
you believe.
Because
Not
certainly
enough
you
to go
are.
through the rituals and
But here,
tithe
in
and
the-
do all the other things. In this workshop, we're trying to.
what has to
learn
happen
how
is that we
to
have
be
to get to a
effective
point where
sponsors
we
to
exercise
carry
our
the
faith
message of
in
the
terms
steps
of our actions
to other alcoholics. That's our job, and that's
our
what we
mission.
teach here in AA.
And that's what the
Now,
12
the
steps
fourth
are all
thing that we're
about.
going to do with the newcomer is we're going
To be vital, faith must
on
be
page
accompanied
94,
by
first full paragraph,
self-sacrifice
outline the program of
and
action.
unselfish, constructive action.
Explain how you made a self-appraisal.
In Bill's story, how
We
you
heard,
straightened
we
out your
read
past
what Bill said, that if a
and why
man
you are
fails
now endeavoring to be
to
helpful to
perfect
him.
and enlarge his
It is
spiritual
important
life
for him to realize that your attempt to
through
pass
work
this
and
on to him plays a
self-sacrifice
vital
for
part in your own
others.
recovery.
He cannot survive.
Actually, he may be
certain
helping
low
you more
spots
than you're
ahead
helping
and he'll
him.
break again.
Make it plain
This
he's
is
under
another
no
way of saying
obligation
the
to
same
you.
thing.
That you hope only
be
that he
vital,
will try to help other
faith must
alcoholics
be
when he
accompanied by
escapes his own
self-sacrifice.
difficulties, and unselfish, constructive
Suggest how important
action.
it is that he place the welfare of
Let
other
him see that
people
you
ahead
are
of his
not
own.
there to instruct him in religion. How many of us actually do that? You admit he probably knows more
wanna
about
ask
us than you
yourself
do.
that question.
But call to his attention the fact that however
Make it
deep
clear
his
that
faith
he is
in
not
knowledge,
under
he could
pressure,
not have applied it,
That he needn't see you
or
again
he
if
would
he doesn't
not
want
drink.
to.
Should not be
Notice the
offended
word
if he wants
apply.
to call it off.
Means
Well, he's
action.
helped you more than you've helped him. putting the faith into action. Faith
If you're
without
talking
works
been
is
sane,
dead.
quiet, and full of human understanding,
Perhaps your story will
you
help
have
to see
perhaps
where
made
he
a
has
friend.
failed to practice
maybe
the
you
very
disturbed him
precepts
about
he
the
knows
question
so
of
well.
alcoholism. This is all the good. The more hopeless
We
he feels, the
represent no
better.
particular faith or
He
denomination.
will be more
We're dealing
likely
only
to
with
follow
general
your
principles common to most
And
denominations.
that's all real good advice, and it's something to ponder and to think about and to read. You know, this big book
Now,
is so dense that if you're not careful,
As
you
a
can go right
sponsor,
by
you're
some of the
going to
most
find
profound statements
you
ever made.
must meet this
Without,
situation
we don't
often.
think about it.
It's
Carefully
not that
read what it
difficult
says,
if you
parse the
know what you're
sentences,
doing.
consider word for word and sentence by sentence
here's
what the
the
big
basic
book is telling
stuff.
us. We're going to miss most of it.
All religions that I know of,
Your candidate may give reasons why he
all,
need not follow all the
ecclesiastical
program.
programs,
He may
all
rebel at the thought of a
semi-religions, all
drastic house
sects,
cleaning, which requires discussion with other
all
people.
have established
Well, you got to know that that's
certain
not going to
basic
be an
principles
all
which they
uncommon, but
believe
most
in.
of the time they won't tell you.
and those basic
They just drag
principles
their
have been
feet.
around forever. They're pretty much the same
They're
across
scared
the
to
board.
death.
It's just that various religions apply them in different ways.
Hey, program is
Some
not
religions
persistent.
have town meetings and nobody
Big
ever
curve.
leaves, and some religions have people at the top in a hierarchy
new
that is
people,
untouchable.
the very idea
And
of
infallible.
actually facing
It
themselves
doesn't matter
honestly
in
and
terms
thoroughly
of the principles
scares
which are
them
being
to
espoused by the religion, they're all the same.
And worse than that,
And they're obviously
to have
true.
to
This
talk
is
to
what
somebody else about it and admit all this stuff.
intuitively at least we've come
And
to
then
know
looking
that
on
these
down the
things are
line a
true.
little bit further, going out and making amends.
But now
to
what
the
do you do
people that
about it?
harm.
You go to church on Sunday, let's
Yeah,
say,
remember,
and the preacher gets
your
up there and
newcomer has
preaches the
probably
sermon,
been
and you
running
say,
like hell from all this
Yeah.
stuff
Boy, that's
most
right.
of their life.
That's the way I ought to be.
Geographic after geographic.
And about an hour
Move
later,
to
you're
town.
scratching your head and saying, yeah, but how do I get there?
Establish yourself as a good
How do
person
I
and then
be that?
screw it up. And pretty soon you got everybody mad at you
When
and
you
chasing
have the
you
12
around, so
steps,
you
you
leave
don't have to
town.
wonder, do you? Because the
Maybe
12
even the
steps are
sheriff's
these
looking for
same
you. Leave
spiritual
town.
principles
Go another place.
restated as steps of action.
Carry
Faith without
yourself
works
with
is
you.
dead. It is the action
Repeats
of faith that
itself, only
counts.
this time worse.
The 12 steps are exactly
As soon as it
that.
gets too bad, leave town.
12 steps are faith in action.
Never face
And
problems.
these are the actions which we
Never
take to
accept
acquire and then to keep
responsibility
faith.
for our actions.
And that's why they work.
And then we go
That's
to
why
a
they're so
treatment center
powerful.
and they tell us that's okay.
And that's why most religious
'Cause you had a
leaders today are
dysfunctional
more and
family.
more coming to recognize that the
And your
12
salt
steps are critical
balances off.
in dealing with alcoholics and addicts.
And you're dual
Because they have
diagnosed
to be
and you
taught
got, and you're,
how
and you're
to put their
manic
faith
depressive.
into action
If you
every
take all
day
these
in
pills,
a practical
you're gonna
way
be okay.
with discipline and consistency,
You
and
were
that's what the
abused, you were
12
lied
steps do.
to, you were born the wrong color,
So you
you
see,
didn't
when you're
have enough
teaching the steps, you're
education,
teaching
you were
something
poor,
of
you were too
enormous
rich,
importance.
you were spoiled,
Probably the
you were
most
beaten.
important lessons that anybody
Everything
can ever
becomes an
learn are
excuse for
contained in those
crapped out
12 steps.
behavior, and we love it.
And as a sponsor, you get the privilege of
Whoever
carrying
says
that
to us,
message.
You're
You
responsible.
see, we're not putting notches in our belts.
Big Book does.
We're carrying a spiritual message to other human
Tells us
beings so
that
that they too can recover.
Selfishness
we're doing
and
God's work.
self-centeredness, that's the root of our trouble.
And when we look at it that way, then we recognize
That we
that
are
being a
the authors
sponsor
of our own
is a mission. It's a purpose
misery.
in life. It's not a chore.
and God didn't do it.
It's a great opportunity. It's a great
You'll get
blessing. It's one of
sponsees all
the
the
greatest
time who
gifts that
will
God
tell you
gives us
that
is the
they
ability to
hate
carry the
God.
message to other people.
Because look what God has done to
If
them.
we take it in that light,
Well, they don't believe
and
in
it's
God
never a
anymore
burden.
because how could He
it's
have let
always a
this
blessing.
happen?
When somebody asks you to help them,
Then you find
say,
sponsees
"Thank
that
you."
say they hate themselves.
because you're being honored
Balderdash.
with their trust.
They've been told
And you're
that.
being given the
Been told
opportunity
they have to learn
to
to
help
love
somebody
themselves.
else at the same
They've
time
been
to
told that
grow
they can't
spiritually
love
yourself.
anybody else until they can love
And
themselves.
without that, you couldn't buy
And they hear
what we
stuff
have
about
for
going from
$10
the
billion.
head to the heart.
That's the bottom line. That's why we're all here tonight.
It's all a bunch
Top
of
of page
nonsense.
94,
You
please.
stop and think about it rationally, and you realize that you can't love yourself because you're not two people. You can't hate
We
yourself, you're
represent
not two
no
people.
particular faith
Hate
or
takes you out.
denomination.
Well, of course, there may be a
Now,
few
as a
people
sponsor,
come in
you
who are
need
pretty
to
much
be aware
that some
Good
of the
personality, got 3 or
literature,
4 active
other than the
personalities
big
in, I
book,
suppose is quite possible.
does not necessarily
But
follow
if you're
that
fairly normal in that
precept.
respect, it's utterly impossible to
You got to
hate
be
yourself.
careful in dealing with your sponsees.
It's
not
utterly
to be
impossible to resent
inconsistent
yourself.
with
It's utterly
them.
impossible to love yourself. But we can
For
do.
example,
We can love the things we do.
the idea of
We can
sin
truly
is
love
not
the
any
things
part
we
of AA.
do. We can love.
Though you do find
the
mention
image
of 12
and the
deadly
definition
sins,
of
or
ourselves.
7 deadly sins, or whatever they are.
We can love the way
In
we
other
are.
literature, you do not find that in the big book.
When we begin to do what's right, to do the next
We
right
don't
thing.
Indulge ourselves in that kind of
When we begin to feel God's love for us,
examination of ourselves.
We have
or
a strong
if
feeling,
that
a
happens to
strong
be your
positive
particular
feeling.
religious belief, that's fine.
and that strong
We don't
positive
teach it.
feeling has to do with what we do.
We don't make those kinds of
Try
judgments.
to feel good and do the wrong
We're dealing
thing.
with defects of
We find
character.
it's impossible.
We're dealing with actions we took which did not
When
work,
we do the right thing,
which
we
were
find that
wrongful
our
in the
feelings
sense
are
that
strong
they may have
and
hurt
positive,
others.
that they are
We make amends in
optimistic,
order
and
to
that
be
we
free
have
from the
happiness.
guilt,
You want
remorse,
to know what
and
loving
shame
yourself really
that
means?
arises
The big book
from the fact
describes
that we
it
may
as
have
being
hurt other
happy,
people.
joyous, and free.
We deal with defects of character and with guilt.
What they don't tell you is that love is not
We deal with
a state of
resentment
mind.
and dishonesty and
Love is
selfishness
loving
and
action.
fear.
Without the action of love, love is just as dead as faith without
We deal with
works.
the effects of fear acting upon our natural
We like to
God-given
think in
instincts,
terms of our feelings
which
being
have
us.
warped and
That's what
perverted
they
those
teach.
instincts.
Now you're going to get
So
a
that they
lot
no
of this stuff
longer
because
work
it
for
comes in
us,
the
they
door
work
every day,
against
to every meeting.
And as a result of the
Somehow or
warping
another, you have
of
to
these
learn how to
instincts,
deal
we're
with it.
blocked off from God.
Frontal assault
So long as
seldom
we're
works.
blocked from
I'll
God,
tell you
we
what does
cannot
work.
recover. The only hope
Prayer.
that we or our sponsees have of recovery is to put
Meditation.
God between us and the booze.
The big book,
And to do that, we have to be free of the things which block
steps,
us. And that's why we work at
Learning
fourth
the
step,
truth.
to find out what those things are.
about what is
And
wrong
the fifth
with
step
us.
to admit those things. And the
Watching
seventh
that
step to
what
ask
is
God
wrong
to
with us
move
be
them.
fixed with God's help.
And the ninth step to be
Feeling
set
the
free
flow
from
of God's
our
Spirit
guilt.
into us.
At that
Becoming
point,
God
we
conscious,
enter the
having
world
a
of the
spiritual
Spirit,
awakening.
and we become God conscious,
See,
and
that's
we're
what we
restored
do
to
about it.
sanity. And
We
we
don't
have
try to
fit
talk
ourselves
anybody
to
out of the
maximum
stuff
service
that
to
they've been
God
taught.
and the people
The
about
one
us.
thing you're going to be violating a closely held
The only time we
principle
dwell
there,
on
which is
the
I'm not
concept of sin, we're in a
responsible.
blind alley. Not
How
only
can I
is
be
it a blind alley,
responsible?
but
Look
it
at what's
also
happened to
happens to be inconsistent with the teachings of the
It's
big
just
book.
too hard to take responsibility.
Furthermore,
for what's
there
happened.
is a prayer in
Take
other
responsibility
literature
for the
which
results,
has
the
now
consequences
become
of
known
my
in
actions.
many meetings
Please
among
tell me
many
that I'm
members
not
of the
responsible.
fellowships as the 11th-step prayer.
And we don't indulge in that.
That
We
prayer
say
is a
just
sectarian
the contrary.
prayer.
Yes, you are responsible.
And it
It
speaks
does
of an
not mean you're
afterlife.
bad. It does not mean you're
Now,
evil.
there are many who walk
And
in
when
the
we do
door
it
who
fourth
don't
and
believe
fifth
in
step,
that.
we're not doing anything for us to say to
Constitute
them,
this is
indictment.
the AA 11th-step
We're
prayer
looking to
is
find
the
out
dead
what
wrong.
the hell didn't work.
Nice prayer. Wonderful.
It doesn't
if
work
anybody
to
wants
play
use
God.
It. It's not the 11th-step prayer.
It doesn't work to
can't be,
spend
because
every
it's a sectarian
waking moment
prayer.
trying to fulfill my
So we have
own
to be
wants,
very
needs, and
careful that
desires.
we stick
It doesn't work to
to the
spend
letter
every
of
waking
the big
hour
book.
when I'm not fulfilling my
that
wants,
we
needs,
not
and desires
in any way
to
become
try to figure out why it is I'm not wrong and
inconsistent
why they're
with
wrong.
what we're trying to teach.
To fill my
Same thing
time
is
with
true
hate
of that
and resentment and thoughts of revenge.
piece of nonsense we find in the back of the book.
Fill my
called
time
Appendix
trying to
2.
figure out the next scheme for
Appendix 2
manipulation.
is
How
a
to
product of
survive.
the atheists and agnostics who were members of the fellowship at the time the big book. We want to take all that away from them, and they don't want to lose. We tried to get that stuff into the show them the big step, and we're unable to do so. The ninth step, and they get scared. As a matter of compromise, it was so now they're going to balk at this. They probably tell us, I don't believe in that, or that doesn't look like an appendix. More likely because most of them are people. One of the reasons they're going to say, "Oh, careful of that thing," is that it is very confusing. Because the big book tells still hearing that same story 6 months later. Not that the bill, for example. That is, if you don't know what you're doing. Had a very sudden epiphany, a sudden spiritual experience. You'll hear around the room that you must. The most men must never tell somebody. This is repeated 4 more times in the big book. It's clear that anybody who reads the book is not going to be confused, thinking they have to have an epiphany. Here's the way you do it. You can take this or leave it. This is what I do. No doubt that the people I know would ever confuse anybody who's been properly taught. Cracker Jack sponsors, and there are a bunch of them in this room right now. Furthermore, they all know that this is exactly Appendix 2 puts God in quotation marks. I'm going to tell you twice. God consciousness, and you're going to do it. Quotation marks. You're not going to drag your feet. You're not and then it says that our more religious members call it. I promise you, though, that I'm going to show you every step of the way. It's got absolutely nothing to do with religion. It'll all be right here in the big book on page 85. Tells us that we all, to some extent, become God conscious. It has nothing to do with right in the eye and tell you that. I'm just pointing out to you that there are certain aspects of you how to do it. Of what you don't passes for common knowledge around the rooms, don't you? In fact, in direct contravention of the big book. I promise. And you'll be just violates the principle that we are not a religion, nor do we teach any particular brand of religion. Never fail. Nor do we indulge in any particular teachings of any particular religion. Never fail. So we need to be careful power and not to all the powers in the step teaching. This does not mean that you individually in your own practice are not free to utilize whatever. And I won't. You believe. There are too many people who need help. Let me tell you something. The worst problem in AA and NA today is lack of good sponsors. In this workshop, we're trying to by far the worst learn how to be effective sponsors. Thousands of people every day and pushed in front of buses by the steps, crapped out, terrible other alcoholics. That's our job. That's our mission.
Now, the fourth thing that we're going to do with the newcomer is we're going to,
fill that out and bring it
on page 94, first full paragraph, outline the program of action. Explain how you made a self-appraisal.
Did you ever see that
how you straightened out your past,
697
and why you are now endeavoring to be helpful to him. It is important for him to realize that your attempt to pass this on to him plays a vital part in your own recovery. Actually, he may be helping you more than you're helping him. Well, you're playing he's under no obligation to you.
Can't you just imagine
that you hope only that he will try to help other alcoholics when he escapes his own difficulties.
Typing all of these things out.
It's just how important it is that he place the welfare of other people ahead of his own. How many of us actually do that? Might want to ask yourself that question.
You see,
make it clear that he is not under pressure, that he needn't see you again if he doesn't want to. Should not be offended if he wants to call it off.
Practice to eat yourself.
Well, he's helped you more than you've helped him.
And the way you do that is you have all these forms.
If your talk has been sane, quiet, full of human understanding, you have perhaps made a friend.
You don't have to write anything down.
Maybe you've disturbed him about the question of alcoholism. This is all the good. The more hopeless he feels, the better.
We
will learn be more likely to follow your suggestion.
Step and the fifth step.
And that's all real good advice, and it's something to ponder and to think about.
Now that's what never
read. You know, this big book is so dense that if you're not careful, you can go right by some of the most profound statements ever made.
12-step work or sponsorship.
We don't think about it. Carefully read what it says. Parse the sentences. Consider word for word, sentence by sentence, what the big book is telling us. We're going to miss most of it.
Is not only wrong from the standpoint
the candidate may give reasons why he need not follow all the program,
but it's totally wrong in concept.
He may rebel at the thought of a drastic house cleaning which requires discussion with other people.
Well, you got to know
They don't know
that
what
that's
steps
not
are.
going to be an all
They claim
in
it comes out of the
but
big
most of
book.
the time
That's
they
how
won't
much
tell
crap.
you. They just drag their feet. Anyway, there's I guess
They're
what I'm
scared
saying,
to death.
There's an old-fashioned way that works, and everything else is very suspect.
A program is not
Why in
persistent.
the world, ask yourself this question, why in the world would you teach anybody to do something that you weren't sure would work?
For many new
When you
people,
know
the
that
very
millions of
idea
people have already
of
recovered
actually
doing what they
facing
hear
themselves honestly and
Well,
thoroughly
what do we need to know?
scares
You
them
learn
to
this stuff and
yeah.
do it and teach it, and that's all you got to do.
And worse than that,
That's what we get to in this.
to have to talk to somebody else about it and admit all this stuff.
Okay, so your candidate
And
may
then
give
looking on
reasons
down
why
the
he
line
need
a little
not
bit
follow
further,
all the
going out
program.
and
He may
making
rebel at the
amends
thought of
to
a
people
drastic
that
house
harm.
cleaning, which,
Yeah, remember,
by the way,
your
requires
newcomer has
discussion with
probably
other
been running
people.
like hell from all
Do not
this stuff
contradict
most
such
of their
views.
life.
Tell him you once felt as he does, but you doubt whether
Geographic
you would have
after geographic.
have made much progress had you not taken
Moved to
action.
town, establish
On your
yourself
first
as a
visit,
good
tell him about
person
the
and then
Fellowship
screw it
of
up.
Alcoholics Anonymous.
And pretty
If
soon
he
you got
shows
everybody
interest,
mad at
lend
you
him
chasing
your
you around, so
copy
you
of
leave
this
town.
book.
Maybe even the
So
sheriff.
it's
We're
looking
going to
for
tell
you.
them
More about how we recovered, but we're also going to tell
Go
this
another
person
place.
about the fellowship. We're going to
Carry
give you
yourself
some ideas,
with you.
some clues about what
Repeat
the fellowship
yourself
is
when
all
it is
about,
time
and
works.
what meetings are, and the other things.
As soon as it gets too bad, leave town. Never face
Now then,
problems.
let's see.
Never
I
accept
guess.
responsibility for our actions. And then we go to a treatment center and they tell us that's
Probably
okay
start at the top of page 95
because you had a
next week.
dysfunctional family.
We're going to get into some really
Your
interesting
salt
stuff here
balances
about
off.
how you go about doing this.
And you're dual diagnosed and you're manic depressive. If you take all these pills, then you're going to be okay. You were abused, you were lied to, you were born the wrong color, you didn't have enough education, you were poor, you were too rich, you were spoiled, you were beaten. Everything becomes an excuse for crapped out behavior, and we love it. Whoever says to us, you're responsible, the big book does. It tells us that selfishness and self-centeredness, that's the root of our trouble. That we are the authors of our own misery, and that God didn't do it. You'll get sponsees all the time who will tell you that they hate God, because look what God has done to them. Or they don't believe in God anymore because how could He have let this happen? Then you find sponsees that say they hate themselves. Balderdash. They've been told that. They've been told they have to learn to love themselves. They've been told that they can't love anybody else until they can love themselves. And they hear stuff about going from the head to the heart. It's all a bunch of nonsense. You stop and think about it rationally and you realize that you can't love yourself because you're not two people. You can't hate yourself, you're not two people. Hate takes an object. Well, of course, there may be a few people who come in who are pretty much split personality, got 3 or 4 active personalities, then I suppose it's quite possible. But if you're fairly normal in that respect, it's utterly impossible to hate yourself. It's utterly impossible to resent yourself. It's utterly impossible to love yourself. What we can do, we can love the things we do. We can truly love the things we do. We can love the image and the definition of ourselves. We can love the way we are. When we begin to do what's right, to do the next right thing, when we begin to feel God's love for us, we have a strong feeling, a strong positive feeling. And that strong positive feeling has to do with what we do.
try to feel good and do the wrong thing, you'll find it's impossible. But when we do the right thing, we find that our feelings are strong and positive, and that they are optimistic, and that we have happiness. You want to know what loving yourself really means? The big book describes it as being happy, joyous, and free. What they don't tell you is that love is not a state of mind. Love is loving action. Without the action of love, love is just as dead as faith without works is dead. And we like to think in terms of our feelings being us, because that's what they teach us. Now you're going to get a lot of this stuff because it comes in the door every day, to every meeting. Somehow or another you have to learn how to deal with it. Frontal assault seldom works, but I'll tell you what does work. Prayer, meditation, the big book, the steps, learning the truth about what is wrong with us, watching that what is wrong with us be fixed with God's help, feeling the flow of God's Spirit into us, becoming God conscious, having a spiritual awakening. See, that's what we do about it. We don't try to talk anybody out of the stuff that they've been taught. For one thing, you're going to be violating a closely held principle of theirs, which is, I'm not responsible. How can I be responsible? Look at what's happened to me. It's just too hard to take responsibility for what's happened, to take responsibility for the results, the consequences of my actions. Please tell me that I'm not responsible. And we don't indulge in that. We say just the contrary. Yes, you are responsible. It does not mean you're bad. It does not mean you're evil. And when we do a fourth and fifth step, we're not doing anything to constitute an indictment. We're looking to find out what the hell didn't work. It doesn't work to play God. It doesn't work to spend every waking moment trying to fulfill my own wants, needs, and desires. It doesn't work to spend every waking hour when I'm not fulfilling my wants, needs, and desires to try to figure out why it is I'm not wrong and why they're wrong. To fill my time with hate and resentment and thoughts of revenge. To fill my time trying to figure out the next scheme for manipulation, how to survive. We want to take all that away from them, and they don't want to lose it. And we show them the fourth step and the fifth step and the ninth step, and they get scared. So now they're going to balk at this, and they probably tell us, I don't believe in that, or that doesn't look like it's necessary. More likely, because most of them are people pleasers, they're going to say, oh, sure, of course, well, I'll do that. And you're still hearing that same story 6 months later. That is, if you don't know what you're doing. See, you'll hear around the rooms that you must never tell somebody what to do. Balderdash. What does a teacher do? Here's the way you do it. I mean, you can take this or leave it. This is what I do, and this is what the people I know do who are Crackerjack sponsors, and there are a bunch of them in this room right now. They all know that this is exactly what we need to do. I say to the new person, I'm going to tell you what to do. and you're going to do it. You're not going to drag your feet. You're not going to give me any excuses. And I promise you, though, that I'm going to show you every step of the way exactly what you're doing and why. And it'll all be right here in the book. And I'll promise you even further that if you do that, you're going to be just fine. I'll look you right in the eye and tell you that. If you do the work, and I'll teach you how to do it, you don't delay it, you don't drag your feet, you don't make excuses, just do it, I promise you, you'll be just fine. And I can do that because I know it's true. You see, the 12 steps never fail. Never. The 12 steps never fail. You and I have no power. All the power is in the steps. I haven't got time to fool with somebody who wants to screw around. And I won't. There are too many people who need help. Let me tell you something. The worst problem in AA and NA today is lack of good sponsors. By far the worst problem. There are people, hundreds, thousands of people every day being pushed in front of buses by crapped out, terrible advice from people who don't know what the hell they're doing. Pull out some kind of a Hazleton form and lay it on somebody and say, okay, fill that out and bring it to me when it's filled out. That's sponsorship. Did you ever see that questionnaire for the 4th step with 697 questions to be answered? Narrative form. You know what one of those questions is? Did anybody ever catch you masturbating? Can't you just imagine the gnome-like figure bent over its
word processor typing all of these things out? Let's see what we got here.
My God. Can you imagine? You see, so many sponsors belong to a group called the Half Measures Group. And they practice the easier, softer way. And the way you do that is you have all these forms. Fill out those forms. Just put check marks here. You don't have to write anything down. Just put a check mark. So what we do in here is we learn how to do a 4th step and a 5th step and 7th step and a 9th step in accordance with the directions in the big book. Now that's what never fails. This other stuff, forget it. If you do a lot of 12-step work or sponsorship, and have you ever tried to do a 5th step with somebody who's filled out a Hazleton form? Forget it. You see, so much of what we have out there that's cutting all these corners is not only wrong from the standpoint of being wrong in substance, but it's totally wrong in concept. They don't even understand. The people who wrote this stuff don't understand what the hell they're doing. They don't know what the steps are. They claim it comes out of the big book. That's a bunch of crap too. Anyway, there's I guess what I'm saying, there's an old-fashioned way that works, and everything else is very suspect. Why in the world, ask yourself this question, why in the world would you teach anybody to do something that you weren't sure would work when you know that millions of people have already recovered doing what's in here? What more do we need to know? Just learn this stuff and do it and teach it, and that's all you got to do. And that's what we get to in this workshop. Okay, so your candidate may give reasons why he need not follow all the program. He may rebel at the thought of a drastic house cleaning, which, by the way, requires discussion with other people. Do not contradict such views. Tell him you once felt as he does, but you doubt whether you would have made much progress had you not taken action. On your first visit, tell him about the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. If he shows interest, lend him your copy of this book. So we're going to tell more about how we recovered, but we're also going to tell this person about the fellowship. We're going to give them some idea, some clues about what the fellowship is all about and what meetings are and the other things that we do here.
Now then, let's see. I guess we'll probably start at the top of page 95 then next week. We're going to get into some really interesting stuff here about how you go about doing this.